Hey, everybody. This is Cheryl at Ask the Therapist. We are back again and here with Drew for just another conversation about things mental health. I have no idea what we're going to talk about, so I'll be learning it as we go along with you. Just a couple of housekeeping items. I am a therapist in training, a pre-licensed therapist, and I do offer clinical mental health services under the supervision of Jamal Crone of Soul Seed Counseling in Washington, D.C. These conversations are not clinical conversations. They are just general conversations about things related to mental health or the journey of becoming a mental health practitioner. And so today we have the opportunity to speak with Drew. And Drew, this is your time. You raised your hand
Mhm.
to interview me or to ask some questions. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to you. You can introduce yourself however you will.
Okay. First name Drew, last name's Thomas. I definitely had never had any kind of formal therapy sessions in my life, but something as I've gotten older, just deal with life. Something I've been more and more interested in from an individual perspective, and also on a more like a family level as well. So I've been just very so when Cheryl I was kind of talking and broached the subject, I definitely did raise my hand. That's correct. Just kind of being very interested in just kind of hearing a little more, exploring therapy, how it could be beneficial to myself and other loved ones. And I know that just from my very brief and not intimate knowledge regarding therapy and mental health, I know oftentimes there's a stigma that still exists. I think it is waning as we become more comfortable and talk about these conversations. But still, even as someone like myself, as a novice in this area, it's still just more questions than answers for myself personally, and that's why I'm very interested in having this conversation today and see where I can go going forward. So.
Awesome.
I
Awesome.
appreciate you for
Awesome.
allowing me to be share this space with you as well. So,
My pleasure and my privilege. Absolutely. All right. So where would you like to get started?
so I think again, so I'm very novice and new to this space, um, as far as just talking about it and getting to therapy as well. But as someone who is a therapist in training, I just always want to know like what is the how do you as someone who's like trying to get in therapy, how do you
Mhm.
kind of even set the road? Like is there a certain approach you have to have, or a certain like how often do you even meet with a therapist? How what was like the approach to kind of getting started on like someone who's looking to get some individual therapy?
Yeah, awesome question. So I think the approach it can be as simple or as complex as somebody wants it, frankly, right? It's like anything new that you start in life. I would think, and in my own personal experiences with therapy, it starts with knowing I need some help, even without knowing help with what, even without knowing what constitutes help. I want to speak with someone. I need some help. Maybe I'm dealing with some things. I don't have any answers. The things that I'm trying to think through, understand, figure out what's going on in my world aren't necessarily things that I want to talk to with a family member or a confidant or a loved one. They're not things that I'm willing or ready to release or process in a known space. And that idea of having an objective third person to say something to in and of itself could be enough for someone to reach out to speak with a therapist. Our jobs as mental health practitioners are really to listen to people, help people identify behavioral patterns or thought patterns, feelings and emotions that aren't serving them well, that are causing disruption in their day-to-day being, whether those are feelings of anxiety, that anxiousness, that feeling of dread or anticipation of something bad to happen. You're out living your world, and then there's always in the back of your mind this thought or this sound or this voice that's saying, look out, something bad is going to happen. You feel like you're always on edge, or maybe you're having difficulty managing your feelings, and you don't know how to say that to somebody in your circle.
Mhm.
I think I'm getting madder than I used to get, and I'm having a hard time controlling this anger, or I'm reacting and responding to things in ways that don't feel consistent with the me that I want to be. And so the first thing I would always encourage people who are considering speaking with a therapist is recognizing the fact that this is a trusted, intimate relationship. And you want to look for someone who you feel comfortable talking to, right? And the first step in that oftentimes can be a consultation. A lot of therapists will offer like a brief consultation. So you kind of get an instant vibe when you meet somebody. It's no different than when you meet somebody on the street or in the workplace, where it's like, I can talk to this person, or no, I'm not sure I can talk to this person. That's what you're looking for, because you are going to develop a relationship, and you're going to be sharing. Those who come into the therapeutic relationship are going to be sharing and exploring some very intimate parts of their being and their self. And you want to do that in a space that feels safe and comfortable to do. There are many places where you can go to try to identify a mental health practitioner. One could, if people have insurance, you can always go into your insurance provider and search for a practitioner. A lot of practitioners are offering virtual visits now. Our practice is 100% virtual. So you can do it from the convenience of your home, but you need to do it in a shared jurisdictional area, someone who's licensed to offer services to where you are located, is what you want to do. You can also go to platforms like Psychology Today, and you can put in what you're looking for in a therapist. Is it important to you to have a therapist who is of your same ethnic base as you are, who shares the same gender as you, is specializes in a certain care? I focus on trauma impacted care and
Mhm.
relational therapeutic lenses are my areas of specialty and focus. People have issues, maybe there's some addictions that they're dealing with, or maybe there are specific ADHD therapists, there are anxiety therapists, there are therapists who deal with church hurt, family issues, family dynamics. I mean, the host of situations that you may deal with, you can search by a lot of those filters in many of the online providers.
I appreciate that. One thing that I'd already had written down that I wanted to make sure I bring up, but you did touch on, and I know you talked about like something more like behavioral um issues. What is like the relationship between I guess like a therapist or maybe like a psychiatric kind of person, or like a MD doctor? Like what is like that kind of like relationship, symbiotic relationship between those different fields? And how
Yeah,
do you know
there
who to reach out to during like something like that, or it's like a combination?
Yeah, that's such a perfect question, because you have different roles that operate in mental health care. You have a professional counselor. That is the practice that I operate in, clinical mental health counselor. My focus is 100% on providing counseling services. Then you also have social workers. There's some social workers who are clinical social workers who offer mental health counseling, but they also deal with like um, living circumstances and situations. Maybe people need housing, or maybe people need community support systems. Social workers deal with the social systems that people need to be and do well in their lives. Then you have psychiatrists and psychologists. One is a PhD, one is an MD. So your MD practitioners are ones who would prescribe medicine. If you say you were diagnosed with ADHD and you need a prescription for ADHD, or you need some pharmaceutical support in dealing with symptoms of depression or symptoms of anxiety or paranoia, or even in some more severe mental health cases, schizophrenia. If you're dealing with hallucinations, you could benefit from having some pharmaceutical support in dulling voices and things of that nature, that would come from your MD mental health counselors. And then you have your PhDs who do a lot of the testing and assessments. So, for instance, ADHD, as a clinician, I can identify your symptoms and whether or not they're consistent with ADHD. And then I would make a referral to a PhD who would go through a full battery of assessments to determine whether or not you you meet the criteria for ADHD or schizophrenia or many of the other mental health disorders that have been defined. Clinicians, I as a clinician can diagnose, and I do diagnose mental health disorders, anxiety, depression, dissociative disorders, addiction disorders. I have the wherewithal to diagnose all of those and to treat them from a therapeutic clinical intervention perspective. Our PhDs are doing the more comprehensive assessments. That's where you might go and you might spend a couple of hours over a couple of sessions and go through a battery of tests. That likely is going to be done by someone who holds a PhD. And again, if you need any medication treatment, pharmaceuticals, then you would go through a MD. So I might assess that you could benefit from some pharmaceutical support dealing with depression or dealing with ADHD. I then am going to refer you to the MD for them to do their assessment and to write a prescription. I may also refer you to a PhD for them to do a deeper assessment. Those practitioners also would refer back to me because they're not going to do the ongoing mental health counseling. So they would say, this individual has been diagnosed with depression. They need some clinical interventions. And they would refer back to a counselor.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yep.
Uh, one thing I was very curious about as well is now is therapy designed to only be as like a reactionary practice, or do you also just recommend being more proactive? Like before, you know, I'm trying. It's hard to think of an example on the spot, but before this or that happens, is that only time where you seek therapy, or do you also like as a mental health professional in your case, do you also recommend it's more of a proactive approach where people are constantly seeking out therapists for? I mean, it could be a myriad of reasons, but
Yeah. 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 I love another question. I love that question. Therapy can be as much preventative as it is reactionary, as you said, dealing with known symptoms, right? The concept of psychology, I don't know that many people know this, but the word itself, psychology, means soul healing, right? So it is never meant in the practice is not just about reacting to presented symptoms. It's about cultivating a state of psycho-emotional, holistic well-being. And there could be things, and oftentimes there are a lot of things that don't rise to the level of what we would call pathology, something that could be diagnosed, like
Mhm.
not clinical depression, not clinical anxiety. If you think about let's just think about a cohort, a generation. If you think about kids who are coming out of college or coming out of grad school, right? They're making this transition from young adulthood into adulthood, where now they have this myriad of responsibilities that they never had before. You got to find some place to live if you don't want to or can't go back home and be, a student or a kid living at home. You got to pay bills, you got to find a job. Now you have different responsibilities that you're dealing with, and that might take a minute for you to get your footing. That is something to come and talk to a therapist about. It's an adjustment period, and there are some adjustment tools and coping mechanisms that you can learn in today's climate. There are so many external factors and stressors that people have to deal with. People are juggling multiple roles. Prices are going up, and what you could afford last year, you now can't afford. And you've got to try to figure out what does that mean. It may challenge how you see yourself as a person or you see your capabilities. speaking with a therapist is someone who can help you evaluate the thoughts that you are having about circumstances and situations, evaluate the healthiness of those thought patterns, and provide tools and mechanisms to develop healthier thinking patterns, healthier relational patterns, healthier being patterns. So absolutely, it's you don't wait until it's broken or you're in crisis to speak to a therapist. If you're feeling an impact and you just need a little tweaking or you need somebody to talk to, that's what mental health counselors are for.
Yeah. And I believe it's just knowing, talking with my close friends and my inner circle that you know, and I think more people we be open to therapy if they knew signs that they may be able to benefit from a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times, well, I think of myself as like a young adult, as a younger black man. Uh, Oftentimes just as a kid, you're taught like, suck it up, or like oh, ish happens, it's all good, get through it, get over it, and not that maybe, and I'm saying that maybe there's no room for that, because life is life sometimes. Like, sometimes it's a little
Mm-hmm.
difficult. You got to deal with it. But are there any telltale signs, or what are signs you maybe have seen yourself or with other close loved ones or friends and relatives, that, and because not everything is all the time super visual. It's not always the times
Yeah,
you can easily point it out, but like, oh, that's like, wait, if you're an alcoholic, you're like, oh, you're drunk all the time. You need
yeah,
to address this. But if you have like depression or there's so many other things, like, that they're not as tangible and visible. Like, what are the signs that someone should have in their own personal journey, or even like friends or family they can see that you maybe that you should recommend, or even bring up the concept of going to a therapist versus like, yeah, that stinks and that's life sometimes, suck it up, versus like, how do you balance that sometimes? What's
yeah.
like the tipping
And
point?
it and it goes back to how we think about mental health. And you alluded earlier on about stigmas associated with mental health, right? So a lot of the things that you described, life sucks and it's like that sometimes. Why does the answer have to be suck it up? Right? It is being willing to think about what we are experiencing in our lived experience. Am I losing? Have I lost motivation? Like, am I having a harder time enjoying things that I used to enjoy? That's a clear indicator. Are my energy levels less than what they used to be? Do I just not feel like doing anything anymore? That could be an indicator. Are my relationships experiencing more friction than I have in the past? That could be an indicator. Am I having a hard time concentrating? Is it taking me longer to do task or work problems? I'm working and I used to be able to get through my emails. I used to spend 2 hours in my emails and get through it and move on to the next thing. Now I feel like I'm just stuck trudging and trying to get through this inbox and I can't break away until I get through this inbox. Changes in behaviors, changes in attitudes, changes, things that just and even that intuitive, I just don't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say I got a headache. I can't say that my stomach hurts. I can't say that I'm sick, but I just don't feel right. Something feels off.
Mm-hmm.
That is a beautiful, perfect time to go and speak with the counselor. And asymptomatic. You know what? I'm dealing with a lot right now. I might benefit from just talking to someone, about what I'm experiencing in my life. I don't have a
Yeah.
label for it.
Mm. And while like I can definitely appreciate that 1,000%, but you are a little more like experienced in this lane and in this like type of situation, for the not, I'm gonna say the common person, the regular person who's not as and has not been invested, has not had the training
Hmm.
or the education regarding mental health. I think a big part. is the self-evaluating and
Hmm.
self-diagnosing, or like, because if you've been in a rut so long,
Yeah.
and like you can lose your sense of, oh, it's not that I don't feel right. I don't know that this is not right. It's just how I
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah.
So I think for myself personally, and from my family and friends, I think that's, even when you get past the stigma of like getting to the mental health, is even like be able to pinpoint, oh, this is not regular, or this is not how I should be feeling this moment. Because I think a lot of times, when I did some reading recently, it said people get like stuck in their trauma at their ages sometimes like that, and like, if I'm feeling this way, I'm 32 right now. I don't want to disclose that, but if you have an issue at 16, and that's half your life. You've been dealing with things and you're like coping and maybe self coping, and how do you even like sometimes realize that, oh, this is not how I should be feeling, like, I'm not enjoying things the way I should be enjoying because it's been this way for so long.
Yeah. And I think that that is where there is the onus and weight of responsibility on us, the mental health practitioners, to have conversations like this, because you are absolutely right, Drew, especially in communities of color, right? So much of our lived experience is traumatizing. You're dealing with racialized trauma. You're dealing with, as a young Black kid. So let's say that you have a Black family who has achieved a level of affluence in their life, right? They've gone to school, they have great jobs, or maybe they didn't go to school, but they have great jobs and they live in a mixed community, and their children. So we want to talk about the length of time and what defines norms in people's lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their children are going to schools where it's racially and culturally and ethnically mixed. But yet when they go to the mall or when they go to the other kid's house, there's an extra eye that's always on them. Or when they're in the classroom and they're affluent neighborhoods or communities, there's some teachers that just won't call on them, that always question whether or not the work they submitted was really theirs or did they plagiarize.
Mm-hmm.
Those experiences are stress inducing, and they can begin as young as elementary school, middle school. So by the time you're in college, you're used to it. And then you're going through these regular life transitions. Going from high school to college is stressful. Graduating from college is stressful. There are stress. And then as you develop and you pull away from parental guidance, and you're trying to figure out your own sense of value, your own sense of right or wrong, what's important to you, what you prioritize, there is tension and stress in that. But when you layer on top those normal developmental stressors with external racialized trauma, just lived experience of being othered, of being pulled out, of other voices, you can have all the support in your natural family and your natural social systems that tell you you are smart and you are beautiful and you are king. And then you walk out into the world and people are walking across the street, or they're shutting the elevator in your face, or they're not acknowledging your value and what you bring to the table. That then exacerbates the everyday normal stressors that you're going to experience just growing up and developing. And you develop coping mechanisms. Maybe you start drinking, maybe you start, smoking a little weed if it's legal in your area. Maybe you are a little freer in your physical, intimate relationships because you're looking for escapes to deal with what is building up. You need to release it. Maybe you start sleeping a little longer. All these different habits that we have that in and of themselves don't appear to be problematic, but when you do think about the totality of it, they become somewhat disruptive and it becomes a little more difficult to manage. It does start with the state of awareness. It also starts with an openness to hear. Sometimes people who are around us can say, "Well, just ask, you doing okay? You seem different." You might not be aware that you're a little off, but your peer group or your family members may ask. And if we're able to separate the defense mechanism, I'm good, and think and say, maybe I'm not. I am feeling a little different. I'm not feeling like myself. And I think that intuitive awareness exists, but we have a tendency to rationalize it away.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just need a little more sleep. Yeah, I just got a lot going on. Yeah, once I get through this project. Yeah, once my home situation or my family situation improves, I'll be okay. But it's being willing to take a minute and say, maybe I can just touch base with somebody. All therapy doesn't have to be years. You could schedule one session with the therapist. A lot, if people are employed, a lot of employers offer EAP services, which give between 3 to 6 sessions, with the therapist, just to talk about where you are and get that objective perspective about what you may be experiencing and what kind of resources could be available to help you manage them better or differently.
Awesome. What, and I think just is more, and again, I, when kind of really think about this, I'm really honing it on myself first and foremost, and some of the people that I really care about, family and friends, and especially at I'm an early '90s baby, so I remember a life a little bit before just being totally inundated with social media and phones and things of that nature. But a generation younger than I does not really have that experience, right? So and I think there's so many parallels that exist. I think one of the biggest ones, as a consequence of that of our society that we live in now, is just the media gratification, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we're always on our phones, and and a lot of times people get dissuaded or deterred if there's not like boom, it's fixed, it's
Mm-hmm.
better, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you, as a mental health professional, what do you guys recommend as like well, I guess two-part question. Like as someone who's first getting to therapy, like how many sessions would you book and how often would you do it? Then two, what would really constitute success? 'Cause I think that's sometimes a barrier of opportunity of entry for folks like myself. It's like, how do I even know what success looks like, feels like? When can I check that off? What does that even mean?
Yeah. 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 And that point about the immediate gratification for certain generations and certain people, needing some immediate relief. You get in, you got a symptom here, you got a problem, and you got a lot of other options that offer a lot quicker response than psychotherapy.
Exactly. Yes.
Um, and I think that sense is somewhat misinformed when it comes from those who have not had healthy therapeutic relationships. What I often hear from clients, just holding the space for them to say what they feel, is like, oh, man, I feel better just being able to say the thing that I've been afraid to say out loud for so long. And if you have not experienced that, you don't necessarily know that that in and of itself is a form of quicker relief, right? The deeper problems, you're not necessarily going to get it done in 1 session, 2 sessions, or 3 sessions, depending on what it is. But there is a relief that can be offered just in being able to think through and process through, away from the immediate dynamic of being caught in the tension of the disruption, right? It's sitting with someone who can help you regulate your system. So much of our world is constantly stimulating. People are overstimulated. You have got to come up with a solution now. You need an answer now. You need a provision now. Everything is now, now, now. And when you have a moment to sit in a space where someone can say, breathe, Just take a moment and let's reconnect and breathe. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? Let's process that. So the time frame, what does it take? That is so unique to every individual and every circumstance that individuals bring into the therapeutic relationship. Um, what holds them and keeps them? The relationship that they develop with the therapist. That really is because this is not about symptom correction, right? This engagement, this process of healing, because it is a healing, it's not just about reducing a symptom, which is a key differentiator between medical practice and mental health care. This is a healing of your way of being, of your psyche, of your thought process, of your worldviews, of your perspectives. It's a right setting of from unhealthy patterns of behavior and patterns of relating and patterns of thinking. And there is an inherent immediate benefit to relieving unhealthy ways of being and adopting healthier ways, more wholesome ways of being that will be realized inside and outside of the therapeutic relationship. You'll find less tension, less internal tension and friction in your intrapersonal relationships. You'll find it a bit easier to make some of these decisions that have been haunting you because your mind now is not clouded with the fear or the anxiety or intrusive thoughts or anticipatory worries. That's a benefit. So it really is about an expanded sense of being and awareness. And then how do you determine what success is? That is something that is born out of the therapeutic relationship as people come into the process and they explore what are the things that are being disruptive. Okay, and then they identify the things that are disruptive. And it's, now what do we want to do about those things? Can we accept them? Do we want to just build tolerance around that thing that is disruptive, or do we want to change it so that thing no longer exists in our world? And that's where, the professionalism and the expertise of your clinical therapist will help you. They'll help you label, they'll help you identify those disruptors. They'll present to you what the options are in dealing with those things. And then the person in therapy gets to choose what do you want to do with it? You want to go away or you just want to figure out how to deal with it? That then becomes the goal that you work towards.
Okay. And I guess this probably be I guess my last question because I know because I'm taking notes as well. So now I have like some more questions that have come that are derived from my initial questions. So I appreciate that as well. But I guess my last question is how and someone that has no experience in dealing with therapists, right? How does one identify a good therapist or even the right therapist for them? Are there like telltale traits? Are there certain identifying things or signs? Because if you've never done it before, I mean, obviously the person whoever you talk to initially is going to be like a professional. But is it just about every individual person's comfortability with whoever they're speaking to, especially for men who are not oftentimes growing up men and girls and boys mature at very different rates. Girls are often allowed to like be in a part of the kitchen and hear adult conversations or do things that are constructive. Boys oftentimes go to the corner, play the ball, and don't break anything. So I think a lot of guys are just not as comfortable or naturally expressing themselves like a not competitive, semi violent type of manner.
Yeah.
So like in that arena in that space. So someone who has no experience and not very comfortable with talking to someone at all, how do you identify the right therapist for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Such a critical question. This therapy thing that we do is 100% relational based. Doesn't matter whether or not a therapist subscribes to a relational theoretical approach. There are many theoretical approaches. Relational cultural theory is one. Regardless of what people subscribe to, the science has proven the effectiveness of the therapeutic relationship is influenced mostly by the relationship that the client and the therapist develop. Does that client feel that they're in a safe place? Can they trust the therapist? Do they feel accepted, not judged? Do they feel empathy from that therapist, compassion? Can they be emotionally vulnerable because this space has been cultivated where they know that they're going to be supported in whatever they present in this space? And your sense of that oftentimes is intuitive and then it's experiential. One of the challenges for people of color, non-white members of society, is that a lot of the therapeutic and clinical intervention processes have a majority presence, white men or white women who are not attuned to the lived experience, to the non-white lived experience. And so things that are presented in the therapy session or the therapeutic exchange, it doesn't resonate with you because that ain't your lived experience, right? And when you meet someone, you call and you're like, hey, I'm just looking to talk I think within 10 or 15 minutes, and there have been some scientific studies on this, and I don't remember the stats, so I don't want to call them incorrectly. But intuitively, whether or not you can vibe with this person. You've met people, you're like, yeah, no, I ain't feeling them. That's not going to be the person you talk to, right? And you've met other people, you could be sitting at a bar. You could be in a restaurant and you could be sitting on an airplane on the beach and you just start talking to someone and you were telling that person stuff you have never said out loud to anyone else before, right? That is the affirmation. When you feel that with the therapist, that could be your person. And the other thing to remember is the person who is your person now may not be your person throughout your entire healing, evolving, transformative process. They can help you with one thing, and then when you start digging into another thing, you might not feel as safe being vulnerable. And so then you move on and you move to another person, but it is relational. Where do you feel accepted? Where do you feel heard? Where do you feel supported and affirmed? That's the good therapist for you.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. Okay, those are the questions I had today. Like I said, I definitely I have some derivative questions that I may need to follow up on in the very near future. But I definitely do appreciate you, just the time and the consideration and just allowing this time for myself to ask some of these questions. I really 1,000% appreciate. I am
I
wholeheartedly
appreciate
thank
you.
you.
Yes, yes, and I appreciate you for trusting me in this space to ask those questions. You've asked some questions that a lot of people in your peer group are dealing with and don't feel comfortable asking. And so my hope from this and sharing this and making it available for others to see is that people will find some courage and some motivation and inspiration to get a little help to just deal with what they're dealing with because we all get by with a little help from our friends,
Amen.
all of us.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
very much.
you.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate you.